Welcome as everything starts coming online onto your YouTube channel and all your software and all those social media stuff. Welcome to Bridges Live Presents Having a Conversation with a Friend. I'm Dr. Paul Dyer and this is Miss Emily Bopp.
Bopp! Bopp! We're going to do this.
That's
third time the charm. Next twice. Time we'll get it.
Yep. Boop. And like you say, people in St. Louis would know this. But I wouldn't, right? We have decided to have conversations about the language of racism and the misunderstanding. We actually feel, and I'll tell you how I feel, and I'll let Emily talk. I actually feel that there has been misplaced emphasis on words that have been hurtful, condescending, and yet not understood that it is hurtful. So it's a language issue. The language issues in many relationships because we all don't have the same definitions of what the words are meaning or have meant or will mean or historical meaning. So I think there's a lot of miscontext. And because Black America has lived in trauma, a fear-based trauma on who is for me. Not so much who's against me, because I tell you, when I was growing up, it was anyone outside of your family, they're all against you. And that is the beating of the rhythm drum I grew up with in my household. And I know many other households have also. Have grown up with, don't let that white man keep you down. They're only there to abuse you and mistreat you. You got to fight the system. It was always the system and the man. And a lot of times that became synonymous together. But yet they're not. Emily, what do you think?
Well, as always, I'm thanking my lucky stars that I met you on LinkedIn. And I love your candor. And I love that you're just saying it how it is and that you're giving your perspective. And I know that your perspective is representative of a lot of folks because I've gotten to know a lot of folks who are walking in similar shoes as yours. And so it's all echoing and ringing true. You know, the idea of words lacking meaning or having, a meaning that one person is saying one thing, it's being interpreted another way. That's a really huge, big, broad topic. When we apply it to race specifically, it gets, the stakes are a lot higher.
And it's murky.
And it's what?
And it's murky. It's not very clear as when it's said, how it's said, situations, rooms, people. It gets so cloudy for everyone. So
my knee-jerk reaction to this whole conversation, but then I want to tell you about a specific word that came up this week in my world. But my knee-jerk reaction to this is that any language or words or conversations that we enter into, we bring ourselves to it. What do I mean by that? We bring our own awareness that has come from truly watching, from truly seeing. So a little kid doesn't have the benefit of having opened their own eyes to seeing the reality outside of their own family. They're going to just assimilate early on whatever it is the culture of their bubble of their family has. I grew up that way, very protected with a narcissistic father. And, we didn't even get the newspaper, lived out in the country, right? So no one is exempt from bringing themselves and whatever background they have to a conversation. Here's where people diverge, is actively cultivating a larger or bigger awareness or not being aware that cultivating your awareness is even a thing and not, actively doing something about making it bigger. Because here's the thing. I'll use myself as an example. And we talked about this the last time we had a conversation. Prior to George Floyd's murder, I was coming out of a paper-thin awareness on racial realities in America that was informed only by my immediate experiences, and I've already told you a little bit about my upbringing. So this paper-thin awareness would approach or hear or digest anything on the news, anything in any conversations going on around me, through that paper-thin lens of awareness not a lot of meaning could even find a place to get stuck there. Contrasted with now me having put in considerable effort to, as I keep coining, see what I didn't know to look for, because awareness comes from watching. Right. Watching creates comparison. Comparison develops the human awareness even more. So putting my shoulder in, and there were a couple times where I was like, I'm getting tired. Like all these books on my bookshelf, I'm tired. Well, then something would happen relationally that would be like, girl, this isn't about you. Right. Put it into gear and get back in the game. And now it's so indelibly a part of my DNA, I can't get away from it. So there's a path there. But now I would say if I was paper thin before, I'm getting fatter in my awareness. And so when I can have a conversation like I did yesterday at a networking event where I was telling this white woman about my executive peer group focused on racial realities, and I was there actually hunting for folks to join this group. I don't like networking events, and the only reason I go is if I know who I want to meet and what I want to try to accomplish there, because otherwise they drive me crazy. So anyway, I was talking with her and just genuinely wanting to let her know what I was doing and see if there was anything there, and not trying to push anybody where not interested in putting a square peg in a round hole at all, but raising my hand. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm about. And toward the end of her conversation, after she told me how her heart is really around women's equality, because she, as a women business owner, had been denied access to an association for women business owners, et cetera, and she'd had some problems getting funding and all of this. She said, but I really like what you're doing. I'm really open-minded. Now, there was something about the I'm really open-minded that stopped the conversation, and the words themselves. Coming to paper thin Emily, I would have been like, yeah, me too. Coming to fatter Emily, I thought, okay, in your open-mindedness, what have you seen? Not judgmentally, but just like, what does that mean to you? And of course, this wasn't that we don't have the depth of relationship. This wasn't the place for me to say, well, what does that mean for you? Closer friends, oh yeah, I'll have that conversation. So I think I love what you're saying, and I do this with my kids all the time. Let's define our terms. Right. What does this mean to you? When you heard that, what did that mean? Who told you? Fill in the blank. Let's just interrogate. First of all, acknowledge the reality and then interrogate it a little bit to try to get beyond the surface level of our assumptions of whatever words were spoken to what the true depth was trying to be communicated. How does that do?
Because when she said it, I also felt offended. It's almost like it's the same, it created the same emotion in me hearing that I too have black friends. Like, what is, I will say something. Yeah, I have black friends. I don't know, what is that?
What does that mean?
What does that mean? I don't know. What are you trying to say? Because what I have heard and hear is you want to associate with me, or do you want to
to what end, right?
Right. And to what extent, or do you want to just, so now I get the question, or do you just want to simulate with me? Because they're not the same. Associate with me is like, or simulate with me, they're not even close. And that seems to be, I know it plagues on Black America, plagues on my America, my personal America. In my mind, like, wow, do they like me as Paul, or is it Black Paul, or is it, what Paul are they talking to? And I'm just a human being. That's all I am. That's how I look at myself, but I have to understand and recognize I'm a black human being. And I'm tall. And I'm wide. And I'm whatever, the statue of me comes across was like, oh, okay. So I have to be mindful of the size of a person I walk up to. I always do. Whether it be male or female, same height. I have to be, because I don't want to push a black presence of fear on them. So I'm always cautious just how I stand in a room of white people.
I hear you.
It's nerve-wracking. And then when someone says, "Hey, how you doing?" They come up to you, you feel like you can almost stand up a little bit, right? Instead of showering, like cowering yourself because you don't want to push a presence on them where they be like, "Oh, Paul was just way too abusive, abrasive." Because just maybe the presence, and maybe my speech, maybe the tone, maybe the volume. I don't know. It's a constant conversation. I know I have, and I taught, and even in door knocking campaigns, but also in men's groups. Be careful how you present yourself, and it's not present yourself to another black person. It's to another white community and how they're going to view you. Because once they view you as something, either associate or assimilate, that depends on whether you get a job, have a career, or have a relationship with someone. It's frightening.
What I love about what you're describing is just a candid, here's my lived reality for, the big words, the code switching. Well, anybody who's watched The Hate You Give or read the book, maybe that was their first introduction to code switching. It was certainly a vocab word for me. I didn't know what code switching was. So, yeah, here you have a whole community, a whole significant portion of our country living under a constant, as you said, nerve-wracking experience of how you just represent yourself and show up. And the other 2/3 of the country, of the community, largely is completely oblivious to the mental and emotional gymnastics that you all have to go through. This is where I'm talking about awareness. Let's not say, Paul's paranoid and,
right.
Let's not pass any judgment. Let's just hear that. That's what I'm telling myself and my friends, right? Let's just hear that and take it. One of my friends, African-American woman, she said, "Emily, I don't get it. If a woman was being abused in a domestic and violence, situation, and she finally had the courage and the bravery to tell someone about it, would any of us, whether she was black or white, but more often even white, would any of us question her and say, oh, you must have done something to deserve it, etc. She said, why? How is it any different when the African-American community, especially in the workplace, is screaming about their experiences of either being invisible? So I just watched a TED Talk on that earlier this week where, it was two things. So there was a TED Talk and then there was a blog post that I read. The woman in the blog said, look, if you mistake me, a tall, thin African-American woman, for someone who's 5 inches shorter than me, and we look totally different, we do our hair different, but we're both African-American. If you call me by her name once, okay, we all make that mistake. If you do it twice, I start to wonder. If you do it 3 times and repeatedly, and we work together, what message is that sending to me? I'm invisible to you. I'm invisible to you until you need, I don't know. I can't remember the rest of it, but I'm getting off track there. The point is for you and I to have this conversation and you to say very candidly some of the things here recorded live, what other folks have been telling me to a white person who's receiving it and just letting it come into me, not trying to qualify, not trying to judge, not trying to explain, nothing, just hearing you and saying, thank you for telling me what it's like in your shoes. That changes every word, phrase, message that I'll ever hear. It gives me something more robust to be able to understand all of that. Back to our first conversation. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I hope people who listen and will listen to this, I would like for you to have these conversations with someone. Have a conversation with yourself. That's probably the first one you can have a conversation with is, how do I hear and how do I see? When it comes to what the lady said, facial recognition is fascinating when it comes to neuroscience. It's because we only develop recognition up to the ages of 7. And that becomes how we recognize familiar people. So if you grew up in a certain area, predominantly of something, then that's the type of people you recognize, period. Even as you grow up as an adult, your brain does not see the differences because you have not developed the recognition of facial recognition in your brains, in your brain chemistry. So I actually can see a lot of people have what you call facial recognition blindness. But and people have it at a certain level, and then when you grow up in a custom that's all I see is black people, white people, Spanish people, and then I go outside that, it's very hard for the individual to distinguish differences of the other races of people they're not accustomed to seeing. So with that being said, how are they keying on to, am I talking to Emily or am I talking to Susan, and what is it? Not just her look, but is it her mannerisms? Is it her kindness? Emily's this way, Susan's this way. So I have to rely on other skill sets and not just facial recognition. And that's where the heart comes open. And that's where I think the heart has a lot. I know the heart has a lot to do with it. When you open up your heart, it's how are you connecting yourself emotionally to someone? Either disconnected or connected. Mm-hmm. That will recognize you that this is a friend or foe. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for that, because I know you have a background in neuroscience, and that actually, again, little piece of awareness. Didn't realize, maybe in my case, it could be folks of Asian descent.
Right.
So I'm going to work a little harder
to recognize,
to find the things that will help me, recognize or distinguish. That's interesting. Well, the word that I wanted to bring up was actually relayed to me, said of me earlier this week, and it was meant to be a compliment, and I took it as a compliment. But it was from a white gentleman to a black friend that he and I have in common, who said, "I'm so glad you introduced me to Emily. Holy cow, is she woke." Yeah. All right, Dr. Dyer, what does the word woke do for you? And I'm going to tell you what I thought as soon as I heard that, because it made me bristle all over.
Well, it is bristle. So I just had a great conversation with a good friend of mine, Dr. George Frazier. And he's been writing about black economics for over 50 years. And he has this rule, and I'll get to read the woke, because he has what you call the 84-10-4-1%. So 84%, 10%, 4%, and 1%. In black America, we have approximately 46, 47 million people. So you have approximately 42 million people that's 84%, that's just sleep. They're dead. They don't know. They're traumatized. They're apathetic. And then you have 10% of those people who are pimping the other 84%, and just to keep manipulating them to stay asleep, to draw money from them, almost like abusing their sleeplessness. Then you have 1%, and then you have the 4% are what you call the woke people. The woke people are actually engaging, activating, trying to create change. And then the 1% have actually done it. So woke is a lot to do with awareness, understanding, and wisdom. That's what woke is. When you can say, not that it's sunny outside, but it's sunny and it's Tuesday, it's this time, and I am this, I'm feeling that, I know exactly where I'm going, I know exactly the manner of speech I use, I know exactly how I listen and hear people, I know exactly how I am affected and how I affect others. I know me. I'm woke. Not that I'm woke meaning I'm better than others, but I'm alive. So I hope that was simple. That was it.
Well, I love it. And I'm over here. I love this conversation. I think I have a metaphor for us.
Okay.
Because I was asking myself, again, awareness of hearing a word and having an emotional reaction, and then going through the mental process of why. Why did that strike me funny? What was it? And what I came to is that to me, the word woke suggests something binary. You're either asleep or you're awake. Mm-hmm. And it's either the switch is flipped off or it's flipped on. And and once it's on, you're done. Right. Like you've arrived. And that's what was really, I thought, woke? How am I woke? There's like a mountain worth of stuff that I don't get or understand. And so here comes the metaphor. I don't know if you've ever driven across Kansas trying to get to the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. Okay, so we made the trip for the first time when our boys were in, grade school, junior high. And Kansas is a long state. Yes. And you're bored out of your mind. And the closer you get to that western border of Kansas, you start thinking the first time, because you haven't ever done it before, you start thinking, am I seeing the mountains yet? Can you see the mountains from the west side of Kansas? Or do you have to get over into Colorado? We don't know. Right. But we're thinking they're so big, it's the Rockies. Maybe you can see them, right? And then you realize that, I think I see them, but it's really just the clouds. Right.
It's just
the clouds often look like, right? So I would say that, that's maybe the first level of wokeness is thinking that you see something and then realizing that it wasn't it.
I like it.
Then the closer that you get, you start to see, oh, there's the mountains. I've never seen the Rocky Mountains before. Did I become woke to the mountains when I saw them from Boulder or Denver? Well, a little bit. I mean, I'm seeing them now. But then we get up and we're headed to Keystone. So we're on the highway. I think it's still 70 at that point. 70 is right across, right? And so we're up into the mountains, and inevitably somebody has to go to the bathroom. And, in the normal world, when you get off the highway, there's an on-ramp. But no, not in the mountains.
Right.
So now Siri is trying to get us back on, and we're literally on one-lane roads. Straight up, Chris, straight down, like the brakes are melting out of our minivan by the time we get to the bottom. Okay, am I woke to the mountains now? What's my understanding of the mountains after having done that detour? A whole lot different. What's it like when I'm now staying at our place that we've rented in the summer and my husband's suffering from altitude sickness?
Right.
Am I woke to it now? Now my son is doing a mountain bike trail down the ski slopes, at Keystone. What is his experience? Is he now woke? So that's where I thought woke just doesn't, it doesn't do it for me. This idea of awareness, I think, is practically eternal. I don't know that. Let me ask you this. When were you woke to who your wife is? On your first date? Right? On your fourth date, when you asked her to marry you? Was it after you got married? Was it when you saw her give birth to your first child? You see what I'm saying? The understanding of another human and another lived experience can go on and on and on forever. There's no wokeness about it.
And I think that's where the beauty comes in living. And I think that's where racial conversation has died, because we are not awake to the magnificent of the other, or the many, or the few, or the unheard. We are starting to hear people and hear their words. You're starting to see the sadness in people. You start to see joy in people. You start to see it all. That's woke. I think when you're not woke, you're blocked. You're blinded by whatever's keeping you in your slumber, whether it be traumatic, like I'm afraid to go out there because the white man's going to beat me down, right? I don't think I'm good enough. I don't think I'll ever, I'll just stay in this neighborhood. Literally, there's so many people who will never leave a neighborhood because this is where they feel comfortable at. Well, there's no work here. Yeah, but I know these people. Yeah, but there's no work here. Yeah, but I'll get by. We're good. We're cool. What if there's a job in like, northern Minnesota? Isn't it cold up there? Yeah, but there's work up there. Yeah, no, I'll stay here. Wow. You would rather starve here than work there. Yeah, but there's those white people up there. I don't know what they're going to do. Wow. Okay. Wow. You're okay with starving here in roach-infested places than working up there because you're that more afraid of white people than rats and roaches.
Well, but isn't that telling?
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
Isn't that telling? That is a reality. That is a lived. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're telling me this, and I'm hearing it for the first time, but I'm now putting it against other lived experiences that have been shared with me. The gentleman who takes an hour trip from his home base that's relatively safe for him as an African American, and realizes once he gets there, crud, I didn't bring my government ID. If somebody, I'm in an all white, very, right wing seeming area, and I'm being denied access to the restroom.
Yeah.
My white friends, you might think that I'm making this up. I'm not. This happened last week, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. It happens to you too. This is killing me. This is why I have to get more in those mountains, and I have to bring people with me because it's killing me to hear that this is the lived reality of our friends and neighbors. My goodness, what is wrong with us?
It's you pull up and a kind of cop pulls over. You have any ID? And you're like, I'm literally stopped in a parking lot. You have any ID? I'm in a affluent white area. Yeah, it's in my car. Yeah. Are you here on business? I am just trying to be like, why? I literally want to ask, why are you asking me this? Like, did I do something wrong? But I don't want to go there, but I'm thinking it. I'm like constant. So here goes that code switch. I got to shrink down because he's standing up. I'm outside. I don't want to project a big 6'3", 280-pound muscular black guy onto this cop who's 5'4". He's got all his gear on, and I'm just like, okay, well, you have a good day. And that's it. That's like, so.
And you're exhausted, aren't you?
I'm not personally exhausted. What I am is sad because I'm glad it happened to me that day. Because I think of people who I know who would be like, not me, I would have told him, and he would have, and then it just would go sideways, and you would have been another person on TV that got shot because you got belligerent because, and I so sometimes I say, well, if it happened to me, I'm alive, because if it happened to someone else, they may not be. So I don't mind taking that. I actually don't.
Well, I'm exhausted for you. I hear this, and again, the 2D Emily that had no idea had her own thing she was focused on and doing, and I was doing a good job of it. I raised a couple of boys; they're amazing, But my goodness, this should not be this way.
We're not having enough of this conversations worldly. We're very. And it's funny because when people have these conversations, when they leave the room, what do you do next? What do the others do next? Like when they go their separate ways, whenever you have these town hall meetings and they're telling the representative, the district this, mayor this, someone running for political office this, and they're expressing themselves about their education and all these other things in the school and stuff, we really need to fix this school. And they leave. And the school never gets fixed.
Yeah, we're really good at pointing to the problem. We're not so good at doing something about it.
So some people say, I think blacks have been talking for 50 years, right? Since 63. We had enough talk. And that's sad because I don't know how things... But we haven't talked where things move forward. I think we've talked and they stayed in a linear sense. It never went perpetual forwardness.
Well, it's because the people in power and the majority can easily forget and dismiss. Yeah, because it doesn't affect them. So I read Charles M. Blau's book, The Devil You Know.
Yeah.
Power Manifesto. And, for anyone who hasn't read it, the main idea is calling for a reverse migration back to cities that could very easily become majority African American, so that we basically create a safe space. We carve out areas where it's not unlike the experience of an HBCU. Oh, I got to tell you, side note, I met someone the other day who did her dissertation on her PhD dissertation, comparing experiences and trauma in K-12 environments, the standard public school for people of color, children of color, to their HBCU experience. It's fascinating, her research. I haven't seen the whole dissertation, but we talked about it. But anyway, and it's not like that necessarily for everyone, and I'm not making an overgeneralization. Right. I'm just saying many folks find for the first time in a historically Black college or university that they're, encouraged, supported, don't have to shrink down into their, aren't code switching. All of a sudden, they can be themselves.
And breathe.
And breathe. Yeah. So anyway, that was a side note to, Blau's book, right? So basically, let's take what's happening for some folks in an HBCU environment and let's do it in a city. In fact, let's do it in a state, and I read that, and having put myself in someone else's shoes, many other folks' shoes, now in your shoes, I think, man, if I was a millennial and I was Black, I was living in an area where, to bring my authentic self to work meant certain, I either might get fired or I'm definitely not getting promoted. And I'm constantly living with, this insecurity around my true self.
I don't have to change my name. I don't have to change my name when I answer a phone. I can be Shanika or
there you go.
I don't have to say.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Right. Yes, that my name is. Yeah. So, I really thought if I was reading Blau's book and I was 26 years old and I wasn't committed because I didn't have a family, to Chicago or wherever, I would take him up on it. Man alive, it was a compelling argument. And I saw exactly how that could be a beautiful, beautiful thing for folks who are in desperate need of a safe space. And personally, I can tell you, I've been through my own trauma therapy this year. And early on, my therapist and I made for myself, not only in my head, but in my house, a safe space. You cannot heal from trauma if you can't tell your neurological systems that they're safe.
Right.
So when I read that book, I thought, amen, we need more safe spaces.
But here's the rub. Having this conversation with, we need to leave this people, we need to leave these white people where they are and go and have our own space. I understand the feeling and the animate of, like you said, feeling safe, secure, and I don't have to be this. I actually think it would hurt.
Okay, tell me about that.
I actually think that because, remember, Black in the Black or brown community is still very small in comparison to the 2/3, right? The population isn't that much. So that means we could get bottled up in an area and they can bomb us like they did in Philly. When they dropped that bomb in Philly in 1984, 5 into those row homes, that is what could happen because we don't control the military. So where are we going to get our safe? We would be like fish in a barrel. They could just bomb the state. They did it in Oklahoma. They did it in Pennsylvania. They'll do it because now that's where they are all collectively at. Now that's unsafe.
That's terrifying. Yeah.
That's terrifying to me because that's where my mind went. People were like, but we can have our own Wall Street jobs and we were all secure. And when we all lived amongst each other, we all took care of each other. I agree. But you remember, they were also able to kill more people when they surrounded the neighborhoods and just shot into the neighborhoods. They did it in Watts. They did it in Florida. They did it in several places where the community was mostly Black. The whites surrounded the neighborhood and just shot into the neighborhood. Okay, that's also possible.
Yeah, so I totally see what you're saying. And I'm glad that you said it. I love hearing your perspective as always. And obviously there's so many folks that to just up and move and participate in a, grand reverse migration, it's just not practical. And it's not something that even makes sense for their life circumstances. So back to this is what you and I keep coming back to, which I love, is how to have more of the candid, open, unguarded conversations that lead to action. So I struggle with the lead to action part on this topic because I think there's so many white people that are still way back in East Kansas.
I agree.
They don't have the wherewithal. They're still so paper thin. They don't have the wherewithal to even enter it. That's why I feel like part of the work that I can do right now is to bring the people who truly would. They just don't have the initiative and the go-getterness, I guess, that other people maybe have, or the time or the bandwidth. They're raising their little kids. They're busy at work. They just don't. But given the opportunity to have someone, pull them along, like hop in the van, let me drive you across Kansas and show you what I've seen and show you what I've found. That's the work that I want to do so that these conversations can be happening on a bigger scale.
I was having a session with someone, and I got into the conversation of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Where you trivialize the pain you don't want to feel by creating a different cognition of your results. I'll take a person who hits a woman. Now, she's traumatized, she's abused. Well, if she didn't do this, I wouldn't hit her. That's cognitive dissonance. Accepting man, I created pain, I need to get help.
Right.
The person will say, well, if she just didn't make me mad, or if my partner didn't make me mad, I wouldn't have done this. Well, that's cognitive dissonance. And the human mind never wants a person to feel their own suffering. So they create that dissonance or that disconnect from their self-pain. Because if I realize I hurt my partner by voice, physical, whatever, then that pain has to be understood and felt and lived through to open up, right? We have to scrape open those wounds to learn how to heal. Well, the person who has to do that self-investigation, that's tough for them. And you're talking about a collective people to agree with other collective people to say, oh yeah, we've mistreated them for years, and I'm okay with that. Wow, I like that. Then, yeah, we didn't really mistreat them that bad. I mean, I paid them a salary. I mean, look at what Nike does. These corporations have what we call internal slavery in their countries of all these shoes and products that these people are dying, and yet we wear the product here, and the NBA, the NFL, and all these multi-million-dollar people making off of these slave people in other countries, and they're okay with it. No one ever talks about it. How is that possible? We know what the factories are like over there. We've seen it. Even if it's been misled, we know it's not like over here, GM in Detroit. We know they're not getting breaks. We know they're not 12. We know they're like 8, 10, 11, working forever to make us a product. And we're like, oh yeah, we're good with it. So we have a sociological cognitive dissonance on human life when it doesn't affect us. And that's the tough part.
Totally. I just was reconnected with Susan Scott's work on fierce conversation. She wrote a book and then she recorded a TED Talk in 2011, I think. And she has a fantastic quote, and I'm going to mess it up. But the essence is that a relationship is the conversation. There's no true relationship between a corporate entity and their customers and their suppliers and the supply chain, all of that. That's big, but between people, between you and I, the conversation is the relationship, and we navigate the unknown future that is emerging before us one conversation at a time.
Right.
So I'm not going to change. I don't want to try. far be it from me to try to change how anybody thinks. What I want to do is engage in true, fierce, not meaning evil, but fierce meaning fully engaged conversations, one person at a time. And I am also thinking about McChrystal's book, Team of Teams. If you're familiar with that, he was an Army general during after 9/11, when we first went into Iraq. And they found that this well-oiled military machine of the United States military machine was completely ineffective against what Al Qaeda in Iraq was doing in Iraq.
I know, I was there.
Because there are these, teeny tiny little. Did you say you were there?
Yeah.
Oh man, there's another conversation we got to have. So anyway, in Team of Teams, he describes the transition from a top-down, well-oiled machine, hierarchy, silos not talking to each other approach to war, to the team of teams, that it's this very amalgamous, silos are completely broken down. People who normally were trained in one little slice of the system are now seeing the whole system. Mm-hmm. So the conversations then are, first of all, get to know another human being
first,
and then hear them. Mm-hmm. And don't judge it. Get rid of the cognitive dissonance. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, just ask yourself why. But trust that this human is telling you what their life is like. And okay, thank you for telling me. I mean, that's as far as it needs to go. But then those conversations can build. But then what I think is the next step is seeing the bigger picture. So if any given employee inside Nike, they're just doing what they do, what they've been hired to do, and they're making, right? But when you start to see, the bigger agenda of the whole organization, then you can kind of scratch your head, and it may or may not change anything for you, but it's the awareness. Right. Awareness has to come first. Without the awareness, everything else is hopeless. So keep having the conversations, because that beefs up the awareness that then leads you to the courageous ability to be able to see what you didn't know to look for, which very likely then is on a systems level.
I'm so happy to have a discussion with a friend, Emily, and thank everyone for joining us. We'll continue to have these discussions and conversations, and fearsome conversations, because it's not just perspective, it's an understanding. We're way past being, well, this is a perspective. No. We're done with those. This is an understanding that has resulted into these generations of where we are today. Period.
Can I leave you with something?
Absolutely.
The word conversation, and understanding. So talking is like you introduced our first conversation, talking to. It's one way and it stays what it is. The words come out, and conversation from the etymology, con meaning with or together, verse, literally line or stanza. So that Dr. Dyer, if you and I, or you and anyone else, have a true conversation, you're together creating something that didn't exist before. Right. It's not just your ideas, and it's not just my ideas. We've now created something new through a true conversation, and that's what I want to get better at.
And talking with people, you cannot have a conversation if you already come with points of references to create an equal something. Like, you have to come with zero sum for us to convert, to develop something. Not, I come with 2, you come with 4, and we're supposed to get to 8. That's not a conversation.
Blank slate.
Yeah.
Let's write a poem together.
I love it. I'm going to send you my first verse later today. Thank everyone for listening. If you have any questions or comments, please contact us, inbox us, or just if you want to talk to Emily, you want to give your email out?
Absolutely. ebopp@enablesolutions.us. EBOPP @enablesolutions.us.
Thank you, and I'm Dr. Paul Dyer, Dr. Paul Dyer, wdyer@gmail.com. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you again in our next conversation.